Hello, Val.
Hi, Jumpy. Sorry, I was just getting on with with email in the absence of company.
Yes, there's something strange. I tried to join by using the Zoom link in the IDP bulletin, but it says that the link is invalid when you click on this Zoom link.
Yeah.
But instead, I entered writing in explicitly the meeting ID and password, and that worked.
I didn't do. I got from Kira, and I think will be in the bulletin next week. The actual, HTTPS link, which I had in my browser. I mean, in my calendar, and I clicked on that,
Yeah.
and that was fine. But
Yeah. But more alarmingly, sorry, I've just tried the draft next week's bulletin Zoom link, and it does the same error as Champal has just mentioned.
If you click on the thing that says this Zoom link, but the meeting ID and the password were apparently correct because
Okay, you typed them in. Okay, yeah, I didn't try that, Champy.
Yes, I just activated Zoom and then wrote in join meeting now.
Sure. But the clickable link really should work, and
it would be nice.
Can you send Megan a quick email, Dennis? Because
yes, okay, will do.
Because she might be sending that out as we speak, almost.
Sure. The other thing, yeah, okay. Right. The other thing is I haven't yet made my cup of coffee, which I think is essential.
No, I haven't made mine either, but never mind.
but I should draw people's attention that I've changed the document in the Dropbox and cleared out previous versions and things. What I did was I put in the new 6.5 that Lisa's drafted, but I also took the opportunity to change into a larger font and make it 15% extra line spacing, which makes it much more readable for me, which I hope people don't mind.
So, I noted, I was just looking at the Dropbox, and all the documents had new dates and so on. So does that mean there aren't substantial changes to them? It's just you doing a bit of tidying.
It's just that's what I've done is just tidying. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we need to check whether
and putting in the new 6.5.
Yeah.
Because actually, I'd spent half an hour editing the old 6.5. I realised that the version in the joint document was still the old one, and I thought that's
okay.
Dennis,
and I put the various bits I've removed and the old version in the archive, if just in case I've got anything wrong. But I shall email Megan, and then I'll make myself a cup of coffee. Maybe back in 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay.
So.
No, I haven't done anything useful either. I have heard nothing from my partners in rewriting the section. So I started looking at it, the section on real-time things.
Yeah, I haven't done anything either. I was in touch with, I'm supposed to be partnered with Glenn, and as Glenn had done all the, the major reorganization,
yes,
I thought that he might want to go first because he would have it sort of in his head, which he said he would. But I think he's been really overloaded this week, so I don't think he's had time to do anything on that. So as far as I know, nothing's happened on that one.
He's in the section I'm in too, Glenn and Jasmina. So yes, they might have been having. Maybe they are doing some honest work. I mean, some real work.
Well, maybe they are. You never know.
So they have things to do. Yes. But the sections are difficult. Well, difficult. They are full of words by now, because we have different parts from everywhere, and there are many words. And the question is how much one should try to compress them into what the message really is. It's difficult. I don't know. Which section have you been looking at? The section?
I think it was 6.1 that I think was
the new 6.1. So
yeah, that Glenn and I were meant to be doing. He may well be involved in more than one, but that was, I think, the one where
6.1.
I had a little note.
Challenges for model structure and complexity. How to use new and better data. Already the title is slightly difficult if I look at your title, because does it mean that the challenge for model structure and complexity is how to use new and better data?
I don't know.
That's the challenge.
I don't know.
That sounds as a very specific part of possible challenges. I mean, in general, challenges for model structure and complexity might be of many kinds, not just how to use better data.
Yes.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Glenn.
By the way, Ben, thanks for posting the link. I was struggling to find that.
Yes, apologies. I don't know quite what's happening with the links, but we're in touch with Megan, trying to sort that out for next week.
I thought I just got lost in my emails, but
no, it seems to be a problem.
The link is okay if you really use it. If you just write in the meeting ID and the password, it works. But the thing that says this is the Zoom link does not work, which is kind of interesting. But meeting ID and password work. At least they work for me, so they should work.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, I was just going to butt in on that conversation about. So I think what I was thinking was that this challenge is about whether we go for well, with more understanding of disease, which I take to be underpinned by data. So in principle, we could, go off on a flight of fancy and say we're going to put in more structure because we think this is important, and of course we've probably all done that. But I suppose the justification for that is that the data somehow supports that additional complexity, and so that's kind of where the data bit comes from. So I think the idea was that you wouldn't be putting in more kind of detail if you didn't believe that it was somehow important, and that because
it's kind of interesting because for a long time I guess that models have anticipated data. I mean, people have done modeling on multi-groups and households and networks much before there was any data on it, just for the fun to see how this changed the results in the models. But now, of course, we have a lot of data, and we also have models which are supposed to contain many, many details, especially these agent-based models. So maybe there is little place for more complexity in those models if we don't have data to support it. It's true. Maybe it's an inversion of tendency.
Yeah, and to some extent, the sort of final section 6.4 is kind of going the other way and saying, if we had, like, at least in my mind, a big part of that section is saying if we had extra data, we could do these other things. So maybe that's kind of what you're suggesting as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I'm a bit with Jumpy that it seems to me that you get a lot of benefit from, or we've had a lot of benefit in the past from looking at models where the structure is sort of hypothetical. It's a simplified version of reality. So it's not really going to be motivated entirely by data, but it's still useful to get a feeling for what different sources of heterogeneity would do to the sort of results that we get. And those sources of heterogeneity will be sort of broadly the sort of things you imagine in a population, but obviously vastly simplified so that one can make sort of algebraic progress and so on.
Well, maybe we should drop the data from the title, and we can just cover that. The idea that you might need data if you're going to apply these sort of models.
No, but you don't have to drop it in the sense that it will come back within the text, because
That's what I mean, yeah.
certainly one of the ways to change model structure is by trying to use better data or new data. So it will come back anyway.
Yeah, no, I just mean from the title.
No, Valerie also said that apparently most of us have had other things to do this week, because there's not much in the Dropbox in the sense of new sections.
No, I did put
You have posted something.
3 there this morning, I think.
Ah, let's see. Sorry, I have to go back to.
But they're basically the same ones as before. The only one I did anything to was really 6.2. No, 6.3, sorry.
Only decision support.
And I think Lisa did quite a lot on 6.5.
But 6.5 is not there, or whatever it's called. What?
Yeah, I'm not sure where Dennis has put it.
Main draft, Lisa.
What's your
6.5
section
is not in
called?
the Dropbox.
Sorry?
What's your section called, Lisa?
Policy 6.5.
Policy. No, there's nothing even with the name policy.
Dennis, what you been up to?
It's a section of. Oh dear.
It certainly was there earlier in the week, because I had a quick look.
Yeah, I noticed it was there. And the one that's, I'm finding the dates a bit confusing now. The one that says CH06 22 Jan DM.
Yeah.
What is the relation of that to the various sections that we've got? You know,
It's the previous complete draft.
right before
6.5 replaced with the new 6.5. The new 6.5 has been tucked away. The original of it's been tucked away in the archive, just in case anyone thinks I got it wrong. Yeah. So.
But you've included 6.5 with all the other sections.
I put it back into the main draft.
Okay.
The thing called 06 is, I hope, the only main draft.
Yeah.
Meaning draft of everything.
so it's so
Yeah,
the
there are the 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3 only ones. Oh, each of the others has got its own. Yeah, so maybe all the other bits need replacing too.
well maybe it's
Well,
easy to keep them separate
Or
for
to
the,
rather keep them-
Yeah.
rather keep them
for the
separate.
moment.
I'll pop it back. I'll detach it. In which case, is there anything in the overall draft that we want at the moment, or is it all covered by these new ones?
I don't know.
I think the introduction stuff's not been pulled out, but anywhere.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, I'll just do that.
Yes, in the meantime, I found the 6.3 that I guess Glenn has mostly rearranged.
Yeah, it's quite minimal though, Jumpy, to be honest, at the moment.
No,
I
no,
just
but
tried.
I like minimal and concise things.
I just tried to, I meant the rearrangement is minimal rather than the actual text, but I just tried to rearrange under those three headings. I was just just starting to try and get my head around what we were trying to say here.
Yes, one question is what do you or we mean by real-time decision support? Does it mean? Well,
Yeah,
it means, of course, try to say something about the situation as it is today. I guess that's real time.
Yeah.
But is it also, in a sense, short forecasts compared to long forecasts? Because the decisions usually touch upon what happens now or in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, I took it to mean just trying to do something useful now, but that could include a long range forecast, I guess. I mean, I guess it's up to us, really.
But being real time, it needs, in a certain sense, to incorporate the most recent data. It must consider those, the most recent happenings, or.
I think so. Yeah.
So I guess now that suddenly Pfizer says we will restrict the number of vaccines we send to you, then we must act upon that, and somebody needs advice how to act then when less vaccines than expected come in. That's real time in a way.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I suppose it could still be insights from models that aren't necessarily fitted to data, or.
Yes, because then one thing, I'll read through exactly how you rearranged it a little bit better than just looking at it now, but the speed of data acquisition or correct data is then presumably important for this section. One should say something about how quick the data how quickly you get the information. Exactly.
Yeah, I thought that could go under sort of the practical challenges, and probably there'd be quite a bit of cross-referencing to the estimate chapter as well.
But, in various places I see should be reference to some other section. So of course we can refer within paper. It's kind of easy because we know what's in the paper. But between papers, I mean, here's an advice by Ben, I think, who says there should be a link to estimation papers. No, yes, Ben said that. What do we know about the estimation paper? Of course, that there is presumably some kind of latest version in the Dropbox as well, but.
Yeah.
We have a general outline structure for that paper, and one of the sections we have a bit more detail in the Dropbox as well, but I'd say probably 6.3, 7.3, 7.4 probably the most useful sections for linking to the modeling paper.
Yeah.
I guess the real time is opposed to kind of waiting until the pandemic is over and then doing a historical analysis of what happened, and whereas real time is trying to make decisions as the pandemic is going on to guide the response or interventions or better understanding of
yes.
what's actually happening.
I also wonder when we will get to the point of trying to guess what interventions did really work. That would be interesting.
One of the things, talking about that, one of the things that's been puzzling me a bit over the last few days, weeks, is, you know, we're doing all these interventions and yet doing absolutely abysmally in this country. We're told that the US is doing almost nothing. I mean, it obviously varies hugely state from state, but, you know, and yet sort of per head, our deaths seem to be at least as high as theirs, as far as I can see. You know, they've got a population of 330 million, of whom 400,000 are supposed to have died. We've got a population of 66 million, of whom about 90,000 have died. I think if anything, if those numbers are
It's
right,
the
we're
same
doing worse.
proportion.
The
or
New
what?
York, the New York Times this morning was saying that we had the worst death rate per population in the world.
I can well believe it. I mean, it's hard. It seems to
I mean,
be
there
it's
might be
higher than the
people who
US.
don't have things recorded properly that are worse, but
Well,
Well,
that's
you-
true. But even so, you sort of feel, given that they're supposed to be doing so little, you know, and all the stuff we see looks abysmal, our control measures don't seem to be achieving a lot.
Not much better. Of course, we'll have to wait for somebody accurately standardizing everything to age profiles and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Because I
yeah,
guess
you're right.
Britain is a little bit older than the States. But,
Yeah.
but not
Yeah.
very much. I mean, there will be corrections in the end.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. And I also notice, since I have links to Sweden, that many people criticize the Swedes for having a strange policy. But when you talk to people in Sweden, they seem rather happy and they are not doing worse. They have not been doing better either. But they're not doing much worse than anybody else. And they still go out and sit in restaurants and do things, more or less. I mean,
Yeah.
So they're not doing neither better nor worse, which is kind of strange as well. And on the other hand, their being more liberal has apparently not helped their economy much more, because people have then voluntarily restricted from doing a lot of things. So,
I mean, that's probably in my mind at least, that's probably the reason, isn't it? That actually individuals are changing their behavior in response to the epidemic. And that's probably a big part of the effect.
Well, a lot of them are.
Yeah.
They have reacted spontaneously, more or less, or spontaneously or induced by advice. But on the other hand, I guess it's kind of natural when you get convinced that you have these threats going around, especially if you're in a risk group, older or whatever, then you start taking measures of your own. But yes. But I still haven't seen any research of that kind. I mean, just going around and asking a lot of people, what have you really done? What measures do you take? What exceptions do you take to measures? I mean, are you willing to risk meeting your children or something like that? Or I still haven't seen much research on the behavior changes of people. So it's kind of interesting. And well, it will doubtlessly come at some point that people try to analyze data. And there have been a couple of papers where people have done what I would call ecological correlation. At what date did one country, say, close restaurants, and what happened to the number of identified cases thereafter and stuff like that. But it's not extremely informative. No, I also believe that personal behavior change is something important in this circumstance. And that will come.
Sorry, I joined late. I'm.
Welcome.
Let me know what I need to look at.
Did you find a link to join with?
Yes, I did. I did.
How did you join?
I typed the number and the password and join the meeting.
Oh, okay.
I always join like that. Why? The link didn't work?
No, the link that says this is the Zoom link does not work. But as you said, apparently typing the number and password works. A little typo somewhere. I think that steps have already been taken to correct this.
Well, they've certainly been taken for next week. So we at least, Megan has been alerted that there's a problem. So hopefully before the next week's bulletin goes out, they'll manage to sort it.
But then, let's see.
So just to tell you that what I did was I took I didn't change the stuff that the one with DM at the end, Dennis. I didn't change it. I just read it, and it read really well, the beginning of it. So I kind of took away. I did no.
Yeah, but Jasmine, and sorry, that was possibly going in the wrong direction. That I was putting things together, and they're actually, most of the separate bits have been edited separately as separate files there. So
Yeah. So I just read the introduction part there, and then I took away the 6.2 and I put it in a separate file, which I then edited and saved the 6.2. And then I only managed to scan through whatever was available there at 9:30.
right.
But the beginning, the introduction part that I read, I thought it, when you hide comments and everything and you just read it as a text, it actually starting to really look good. I think it's there almost, that part.
Good.
Are you referring actually just to the introduction, Jasmine, or to the early sections as well?
So what I was reading is now not here anymore.
Yes.
It seemed to have disappeared.
Yes,
So let me just open.
I've now put it as back, so we just have the separate sections.
So let me see.
Because we
What I
had
read
that
is
divided.
only.
Sorry.
Yeah. So it's what I mean is introduction 6.0.
Yeah, okay. So that I think, and that goes back to what we were saying just before you joined us, Jasmina, that we talked very briefly about 6.1 and the fact that it was talking about challenges for modeling raised by data, how to use new and better data. And we were saying that we seem to have lost the idea of modeling for its own sake a bit, developing models not necessarily informed by data, but structures which seem useful. But it's dawned on me that actually we've got some of that in 6.0 in the introduction.
Yeah.
So we may want to put some more in this section in 6.1 to pick that up and say a bit more about it, but it hasn't totally got lost. It's back in 6.0.
I think in a way there is not a challenge to build a model. Anyone can sit and build a model. The challenge is around deciding what framework to use, and then the other challenges we're talking about. So it almost is right in my mind that the modeling introduction will discuss the possibilities of building different frameworks, the three key ones, and then picks up. But that there is a challenge around which is the best, but I often is a choice of a modeler and the question you're answering that drives you to decide that, right?
But you see a difference between framework and model as words or concepts.
I do, because to me framework is a model with data, with scenarios to answer, whereas a model themselves it's the set that you use. So an agent-based model versus a compartmental versus a branching process model.
Those are frameworks, according to you.
So those are models and populated with data and running scenarios. Well, yes, okay. So I think, yeah. So to me, the framework becomes when you make it alive with data, and but maybe it's the other way around.
To me, it's
now that I'm saying this.
Yeah. To me, it's the other way around. That framework is the more generic, and then the more specific you make it, the closer it becomes to a model.
So framework to you is just the technical aspect. Yeah. Actually, maybe.
I mean, also framework just makes it sound like you've caught more than you really have. I always think.
But let's see now. So framework is I represent the population as compartments and make things flow between compartments. Is that a framework then for thinking about the disease, that people flow between compartments? So compartmental models It's a framework.
So to me, that's a structure of a model. And framework, I mean, maybe framework is too grand a word for just writing, deciding if you're going to write a population equation or individual based, you know?
Yeah, hence my comment that I think framework is often used to sort of denote the fact that you've got something quite grand there that is maybe quite general.
So would it make sense to just in the 6.0 we just have a paragraph that discusses different structures of a model?
Not totally sure. I agree with the idea that there aren't any challenges for modeling per se without data. I mean, if you think about the modeling that's been done over the last, I don't know, 20 years or 10 years or whatever, you know, an awful lot of the increased understanding about heterogeneity has come from developing models, idealized models. And I'm not convinced that there isn't scope for doing more of that. I mean, one might say, for example, that one wants to investigate different ways of incorporating contact tracing into models. And it's not so obvious how to do that in compartmental models as in agent-based models and so on. But I'm sure there is scope for people to investigate different ways of model structures.
I think similarly in the whole sort of spatial thing for human population is still really not very satisfactory. You know, plainly what I used to call a spatial model and work on a long time ago, which is, you know, where you're sort of all living on a lattice, or perhaps you have some contact at a distance, but so on. Is plainly, you know, it doesn't really. I mean, it works perhaps pretty well for crops or orchards or something, but not so well for human beings. And the best alternatives seem to be just to have sort of lots of compartments, or to have agent-based models which are just take data which may or may not be all the relevant data. So I do think there's a gap for better understanding.
But these, am I right in thinking that these changes, so say contact tracing, so why we don't need to think about contact tracing as an adaptation of a compartmental model were we not to have a contact tracing intervention? So I've tried to put the point around the need to in 6.2. So when we model interventions, we need to be thinking about this. And one aspect is that we adapt that model, we extend a model because we need to have contact tracing done in a better way. But would it be still interesting to just do a contact tracing model per se without a viable intervention? I mean, yes, interesting technically, but
well, I think it would. I think it would be interesting to, you know, the whole business of interventions generally, not specifically contact tracing, is something where you might think, I mean, you know, if you think about all the work that's been done on vaccination strategies and so on, of course, a lot of it is very focused on particular problems and data, but not all of it. And some of it is much more, you know, about strategies for vaccinating populations by, well, you think back to the work that Dennis and Janpi did about the time of the original Newton program. That was sort of, well, they can say more than I can, but that wasn't, as far as I remember, driven by a particular vaccination problem, but just the general idea of how you might attribute vaccine under limited availability and so on. Sort of some general principles. And
of course, I'm playing devil's advocate because my paper I led on a paper that was talking about the need to expand an SCIR model into contact tracing. But I'm just wondering, so why did we lose the section on modeling then? Did we lose it down the road somewhere?
I think it's in 6.0 at the moment in the introduction.
Well, it's given the discussion we just had, it's kind of 6.1, isn't it?
Well,
Structure.
6.1 has become more about data. Well, it's
Yeah.
both, but I
Well,
think
we
it's
just
become
had
more about.
this discussion before you joined, Jasmine.
Ah.
So it's, if we drop data from the title and just call it model structure and complexity, and then we can describe the different motivations for that. So, new data is one of the motivations, which sort of like maybe got too big. But then other motivations are, just sort of theoretical interest, analytic tractability, and also interventions or sort of policy needs are. I always remember Neil Ferguson talking about the fact that sometimes you just have to put something in a model because the policy people want to know about it, regardless of whether you necessarily can parameterize it.
No, I like the idea of having two subsections that say data can drive models and models can drive data, or data needs and model needs in both senses, right?
Yeah.
For instance, I don't know if you've thought about it, but talking about contact tracing, there's not very much data on how contact tracing is really done. Exactly what delays people face, the percentage of people found, depending on the ways it is done. I mean, you could have a lot of data on how contact tracing really is performed under various schemes. And I haven't seen such data. Of course, there might be data I do not know about. Usually, if you're lucky, you just get results in the sense that 40% of the people were found or something like that. But not all the details we would need in modeling exactly what delays and what happens.
Jean-Pierre, I was looking for something on a rather different topic, but I found someone who's also was working on COVID and who had done some kind of been involved in a project putting together data on the sort of delays in contact tracing for across all the United States. I could see if I could find you the reference for that.
Yes, please.
I mean, it probably doesn't have all the detail you want. I mean, the bottom line was very depressing, really. It was essentially that the average delays involved in practice were sufficiently long that it was pretty useless. There may be other, but I mean, it would be, so what would be good? Well, obviously would be to have comparison with other countries to see if there are very likely some countries that are doing it better. Because it seems to me very obvious as really without doing any modeling that getting if contact tracing is to be useful, anything you can do to speed it up has to be one of the most important ways of making it more effective.
Either that
If
or
you have delays of 2 days before people get a test, and then 2 days before they get the result, and 2 days more before they isolate, it's not rocket science to say that's going to be pretty useless.
Dennis,
they'll have had time to on to by then.
Did you get a number from, I don't know if you remember, from those references around what is the efficacy of contact tracing? Like in the 10 or magnitude of 10, or like, because my understanding is it's much lower. It's in the order of magnitude under 10%.
You mean of cases saved or reduction of our noise?
No, as in how the efficacy in reduction. So how much would you reduce R by just contact tracing themselves?
How much would you reduce R? Yeah, I think that's I think for I've seen various numbers and I can't remember. No, I haven't really been.
So because my understanding is that if we take R as a metric,
that it might that. But I remember being told. I mean, maybe this is a conversation with Julia, but a long time back in the summer as to what sort of difference contact tracing could make, and the opinion. If it wasn't Julia, I think it was someone who was involved in SPI-M. was something to the effect that if the R0 without contact tracing was less than 1.5, then contact tracing might get you down to below 1, which is obviously suggesting that contact tracing can reduce R0 by about a third.
There was an early, I mean, it's a long
That
time
seems
ago,
to be,
an
in
early,
retrospect, probably rather optimistic.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, I think one could, looking at the logic of contact tracing, I think you could easily convince yourself that that ought to work. It just
I
seems
mean, we could,
difficult.
I could, yeah. And I
difficult
have simulated, but so the point being there are 3 parts of the TTI, and my understanding is that they all have to be sufficient rather than one being better than the other. And the tracing part is the most difficult to do, and hence done least.
I mean, the other thing I remember, the other thing I remember reading, and that this is affecting how good it is in the UK, was just how much better local authorities that were doing their own contact tracing were than the government-run one. I was reading. I mean, this is totally anecdotal, but I'm trying to remember where I was reading. But this was someone's blog recently about how the official contact tracing information had the online system or whatever. They'd got sort of garbled phone calls by people reading rapidly from a script, telling them to self-isolate about 3 weeks after they'd had the test, and it's plain that it's a completely broken system. So it may be working in some parts of the country, of course, but so I think there's
No, I think it's an important and interesting point.
It's difficult to know where it is on the sort of modeling through to politics or spectrum, because it's all about policy and management and public trust and all these sorts of things. But underlying it, there's obviously a role for modelers in looking at all the links in the chain that need to be got to make contact tracing work. I mean, the role of modeling here, presumably, is to point out improving which links is going to have the best effect.
there was some general work, wasn't there, a long time ago, quite early on, I think of Neil Ferguson's, where he ran the model and looked at the effect of different sorts of potential NPIs in terms of what might on its own or in conjunction with some of the others, act to control things and bring R0 below 1. And I assume that work, didn't just stop, but has continued. But that was very much, I think, in the context of his model or their model, the imperial.
But so one thing that I can do, and I can do this possibly quite soon, is look at what R is now, and let's see if how much we can bring R down with stepped up vaccination, with same vaccination as now, but stepped up contact tracing, or those being the same and just stepped up isolation. So that would allow you to consider these different, as you call them, links in the chain, Dennis, and see whether one is more powerful in controlling an epidemic metrics if R is the right one.
And that would be in the context of your particular model.
Yeah, exactly.
I suppose in an ideal world, one would do this sort of exercise with a variety of models.
Yes.
In the hope of getting, the same sort of messages.
Yeah, and I mean, we could ask the Oxford group. So I have links with them, and there is an agent-based model. We were trying to find some scenarios that we could run that are analogous. So we could ask them as well. So Will Probert, Rob Hinch. Glenn, is your model able to do that?
I'm not really sure how we handle contact tracing. be honest.
Okay. Is anyone else's model got contact tracing as a sort of thing that they can increase or switch on and off binary?
No.
I
But
might,
anyway,
I might
that's
know, I might
something.
know some people that do have a model like that, so I can put you in touch with them if you want.
Mark Birkin, maybe those people or not?
Well, no, I don't really know
Okay.
them well.
Okay. I don't know. That might be an interesting thing to run separately to this.
Yeah.
Anyway, go back to the modeling paper. But we could ask, I mean, we could ask Mark Bagelin is the guy who's running all these models, Valerie, in News Group now. And I worked with him before. So I mean, I know he's busy, but if you were to have time.
Yeah, it would. Well, I think it will be interesting to know what they're doing, because I'm sure they are exploring different scenarios for all these things. But
as far as I know, they're not focusing on contact tracing per se, but maybe they are separately. Okay.
But I think for us, for our paper, it's all NPIs. I mean, I was just using contact tracing as an example, but it's not the only one. So I think it would be interesting in general.
Yes, because there are also questions about, say, economy of resources. How much do you gain by a contact tracing attempt compared to just isolating the household and some very easily named other persons, and that's it? You could save a lot of energy if you concluded that 80% of the thing is just the household or something like that, if that is the case. And it depends on the diseases, presumably, and how they infect close contacts and how they infect far away contacts and so. So that's something general to say, in which cases you should do what and try to identify that case, maybe. And that is interesting, because it came to my mind that could already be done approximately in a rather abstract model, like the household model that Dennis and Frank and I were interested in a long time ago, without any specific data, just to have some hypothesis on the balance between the within household infection rate and the external rate, and when do you gain a lot, or how much has been infected outside when you discover the first case in the household or whatever.
So
those are simple models, and they are of course not exact, but they give you an indication of how you could start evaluating things. Because I don't know how authorities, I mean, there are these papers that have been influential, like Fraser's one on which diseases are difficult to contact trace. But apart from that, I don't know if the authorities have had much advice on, is it worth the pain of trying to do it, and how should you, and what's the most important part, and whom should you concentrate on among possible contacts and stuff like that. But anyway, yes, contact tracing is not the only intervention. I mean, most people have gone for closing restaurants and bars and avoiding visits to grandchildren and whatever. So
I put the thing I was referring to in Slack. It isn't very specifically about contact tracing. It's more an across the US survey of test delays involved in testing. But it's just one of the key takeaways was that testing is too slow to support contact tracing. So anyway, it's of some relevance, but not doesn't really go into contact tracing in detail, I don't think. Though perhaps something else in that project does. It's obviously a collaboration of various academic institutions in the US.
But I mean, that's good, because that shows how many papers we then have to write about these things, if there's not too much in it.
But when you're talking about strategies like closing restaurants and so on, is it based simply on the some sort of estimate of the number of contacts that you save by that, and therefore, you know, a reduction in the effective contact rate? Or is it being done with much more structure than that? I mean, you know, in terms of different sorts of contacts. Anybody know?
So I can tell you, I do it both ways. When you want a quick analysis, you do it the first way that you described, i.e. you assume that there'll be an overall reduction in contacts that will drive an overall. If you wanted to do it the more complex way, in agent-based models, you have a network structure on which you can cut off edges, which is basically equivalent to that, but in a more complex and more detailed way, which edges you cut, etc.
But when they are devising policy, which are they using, or is it both?
I don't know specifically. I think the first one is my guess, because compartmental models can only really do that.
Yeah, so that's my guess too. So, you know, a lot's being driven. I mean, there are a lot of different ways you might achieve a reduction in contacts.
Yeah.
I think Adam Kachowski and I think Julia Gog was involved in that, did something based on the BBC pandemic data. So I think in the summer they had this paper out. I think that's one you were talking about before. So that would, you know, take into account the kind of clustering of contacts. I presume that's quite important. And
but it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think it clusters them in a concept of like restaurants and things like that. It's broad reduction still in number of cases.
True, yeah.
So it's still the first scenario, even in that paper, I think.
But I mean, one of the basic problems there is that we still don't know whether passing by 1,000 people in the underground for half a second each, or standing close to 3 people for half an hour, is worse in the sense of how many people we infect. We still have a problem with this contact thing in turning them into effective contacts for spreading disease. And so I guess that decision makers have just guessed at what kind of meetings of people can we get rid of without too much damage to people's lives. And so they decided that theaters can be closed, and probably restaurants, and probably gyms, etc., in some order of, but probably not total communications, because all mass transport is evidently a risk. But that cannot be closed down that much. You can, in Italy, for instance, for a while, all the buses were just used up to 50%. They had really put red signs on seats, do not sit here, etc., to try to reduce contacts between people on buses. But then they had to stop that because it was not enough to restart normal life. They didn't have enough buses to put in to go on with that strategy. So I guess that very much is what I think Anglo-Saxons call touch and go, that they try different things, but they don't really know what effect it will have. And since they always try more than one thing at a time, we still don't really know which of the things had what effect or in synergy. I don't know, maybe I'm too pessimistic about what's known about these things, but I think that Valerie had the same idea, that the main thing is to reduce places where people are in contact. And then let's do this in some ways that are socially acceptable or can be done. Also because you need, in a sense, to define places for an intervention. It's much less easy to tell people than not to meet in the streets. You can do that by distancing, maybe, but while a bar or a restaurant is easy to define, that's a place that you can close.
My understanding is that we've got quite good data on where people go to work, but we don't have very good data on where, you know, how people use their leisure time. That's maybe that's something to identify that.
Mm.
I mean, even with work, obviously, it's kind of.
Mm.
I think you know people cluster together in these. I forget what the term is in England, but you know, the sort of lower data level of the census is kind of maybe an area of maybe an industrial park, or like in terms of houses, about 1,000 people. And so there's quite good data on that, but there's very little on what people do outside of work. But even there, it's kind of quite aggregated.
No, but then I think that even decision makers go by their experiences, which might not be completely statistically true. But if you have been to a pub in Edinburgh or London on Friday evening around 6 o'clock or something, then you think of that as a crowded place, right? And that must be closed. So you kind of go by intuition in a way.
What are we doing? We've
What are we doing for the paper?
disintegrated the paper. We have to rebuild it again now.
We
A bit
just
like
destroyed it
what's
again,
that?
yeah.
Who's the cook that does Heston something? The food that.
Can we just recap, because I'm getting lost and I don't know about anybody else. So
Me too.
apart from the introduction, we've got 5 sections at the moment, I think, or bits of draft.
Yes.
Which of those are people still working on, and which of them are where people have done what they were expecting to do and are now waiting for reactions? Now I think Lisa has done hers, and therefore the rest of us need to read 6.5 and get some comments back. Are any of the others in the same state, or
Yeah, 6.4 I think was my section, and that's pretty much
great? So
done as far as I'm
6.4 and
concerned.
6.5 we will need to read, but 6, 1, 2 and 3 are
Three
still
has been reworked by Glenn a little bit. It
A
has
little
been
bit, but I
restructured.
don't really think it's at the point where I'm.
Yes, no, I have not contributed.
So
So
that-
I will read it certainly and try to
Yeah.
complement what Glenn has done.
okay.
And
So
I need Peter hasn't looked at 6.2 at all, so I would rather he looked at it, and then we have it ready for people.
okay, so that's good. So it sounds as if
Also, I
least
would
from
say that. Sorry, Ben, but I would say that because I think I was one of the seconders on 6.4, and I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. And I'd quite like.
Right, that's fine. I think you were only down as a question mark, so I don't think we'd even
was I?
check with you whether you were happy to do that. But it was just we thought you might have something else to say. So, you can just also be one of the reviewers if you just want to look at it with other people, or if you want some time to look at it and make your own.
I don't know. In my mind, it links to 6.7.4 as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I was kind of going to have a go at both of those next week. But.
Yep.
So 6.5 is ready then.
and
6.4
6.4 and 5 are ready for us to comment on, and 6, 1, 2 and 3 are ready for those of us involved to work on, or work is still underway. Is that right?
Yeah,
6.0 is sort of okay for the moment.
I think
so.
we leave it for the moment.
Yes.
Until we've I mean, it might.
Until we have these 5 sections.
Yeah.
And then we have 6.6 also after we have done the rest.
Is that the discussion at the end?
I suppose so. There's no
Yeah,
discussion yet. Or
Okay.
some kind of last wise words. I don't know.
Could I bring out my instinct for tidying things up, and ask if when we stop, if everyone can make sure they're not editing any of these things. What I'd like to do is to give them simpler titles. I'm just going to call them, but I'm going to put in the word draft for 6.1, 2 and 3, so as to emphasize that those are the ones which are currently being worked on. And I'd also, if people will forgive me, I'll do the same as I did for the other section of making them in slightly larger, more readable font, but otherwise I won't change them at all.
Yeah.
That'd be okay.
Could you do draft for 6.4 as well,
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. And then when you yeah, so when the people who are supposed to be dealing with 1, 2, 3, and 4 have done their worst, they can replace the draft version with, get rid of the word draft and put their initials and the date or something on it, perhaps.
Could I
It is
accept-
difficult, isn't it? Because I find I tend to look at the dates and then I can't decide whether this is one that I've read before and hasn't changed apart from a tiny tweak, or whether it's totally different and I need to start again. But maybe that's just me.
Well, I think the idea is you.
I mean, when I say the dates, I mean the last modified
Yeah.
date,
Yes,
and
but
that's
now-
obviously quite
Now
misleading.
there's a conflict because I see that I think Dennis has done something to 6.3, and in the title of the file, the date is the 20th of January.
Yeah,
But
that was
we
probably
have
my
a
fault. I shouldn't have done that.
That's not me.
It will have a modification date, which is 22.
It was-
So
yeah, that was my fault because I gave it
you
that.
change the title.
I created it, but then obviously I've changed it since today.
No, so there's one date in the title of the file and another modification date. And we should believe the title in the file, the date in the title, more or less.
I think it just needs one date at the end of the title, which is the date it was last
Edited,
changed significantly.
significantly changed. Okay.
If you just correct a typing error or something, then you don't need to change, I would say.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to touch, and maybe this is not the right platform, but Dennis, you mentioned this funding from Cambridge College, from Trinity, I think,
Trinity, yeah.
around future work, and I was wondering if conversation there I've been thinking about what do we want to look at next, and maybe questions around the sort of better framework is the right word for quantification, uncertainty, or thinking about how we do these things. I wonder if people are interested in forming a group to look at developing a proposal for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. From my perspective, at least to start the discussions.
I think two things. I think that's a good idea, and I think but my thoughts on that were that I think they are most interested in things that are related to data. So I think you might want to pitch it as, getting the best data and making the best use of it, sort of thing. And the other is, I think that I wonder if there's an opportunity in the Trinity funding for support for setting up a better network of epidemic modelers across the world, because I think that setting up a network that would really be effective and useful, is perhaps a challenging task, and but so I think it's not just something one can do, like by setting up a Facebook group called whatever.
No, the idea is Valerie saw a similar attempt from the Nordic countries. They are trying to form a Nordic modeling group or something like that.
Well, I think that's really good. I mean, I guess if you think about the numbers, I mean, well, it's just population as much as anything, but the numbers of groups, modeling groups in the UK compared with the number in each individual Nordic country, it obviously makes a lot of sense for them to collaborate and better, and that's a good way of doing it. But I think anything that improves sort of networking must be a good thing.
Yeah. Again, I think it would be at the highest level. I think it would be useful to look at things like that WHO independent panel report about what it looks like from a WHO perspective in the way of trying to get everything from modeling to data to whatever else working better for the future.
Very difficult, I think, to, and I guess you need a combination of, I mean, I don't think everything can be top down in
No.
terms of sort of prescription of what needs to do. I think an
Well,
awful lot of it needs to be bottom up, but you need to sort of make sure that everything's off the bottom worldwide, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, no, I think that absolutely. I think what I'm trying, I think the concept of a sort of network of epidemic modelers worldwide is absolutely is that bottom up, is to try and get bottom up to work, but it needs, you want to try and think of a way that it is open and flexible, but supports the best quality. Because at the moment, I feel if you just sort of started an epidemic modelers network across the world and invite anyone who's wanted to sign up, you'd be inundated with
Yes.
all sorts of people who, with the best will in the world, didn't really have much to contribute. So
I wonder whether a pathway to do that then is via the Society of Mathematical Biology Epidemiology Group, which is run by Jen Haffenen, I think, and I'm involved in the membership there, in the board membership. So
Yeah.
might be a better way to do it, because they have an overview of the sort of world epi world, if that's the name.
yeah, well, if you can,
That sounds very good idea.
if you can let me, can you give us a bit more sort of information on that?
There is a conference. I can. There is a conference that we are. Well, there's a conference being organized on the 7th and 8th of February, and the idea is to sort of gauge how much of the SMB community is interested in EPI, and Jane is running it. So I am not involved in the running of it. I'm only going to give a talk. So, and I think I can tell you more after that, maybe. When is the deadline? Is there a deadline for the Trinity funding?
Trying to remember, I think they were trying to get initial suggestions by this month, I think. I haven't been in contact with them for a couple of months, so I don't know. I could.
Okay.
So I'm just looking on the website as we speak, so it might, they might say something about a deadline.
But I think this sounds like two different things. So one is around building capacity in worldwide epi modeling, but from people who are doing it rather than people who want to do it, or as you know, then put it much better than I did. And then the second one is actually a network here within the I&I community that could potentially look at data at the forefront, but modeling the driving force of it.
The MEDUS network comes to mind here, the US one.
That's true.
You're familiar with that?
Yeah, I am familiar. That's true. And the University of San Diego also do. They kind of do a lot of control over the infectious disease modeling there, with a focus mostly on HIV, but other things as well. They have their network.
The Trinity website says interested parties can register their interest. Formal applications will open in early October. The submission period will close in January 2021.
Okay.
So it sounds as if, unless they've extended that and not put it on their website, which is always possible, it sounds as if time is almost out on that one.
Okay, let's have a little think over the weekend if we have a spark idea and time to do something. Otherwise, as you say, a week is too short a time.
Is this the Trinity Challenge?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's already closed, it says.
Has it? Oh. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh.
It says, please note applications for collaboration have closed for the initial inaugural challenge, but they'll welcome new collaborations from autumn 21.
Okay. Oh, so we can think about.
Perhaps the essence of a bottom-up network is that it should be done bottom-up, and if it needs funding, it should wait until it knows what it wants to do before it gets funding.
Yeah, good idea.
Okay,
Okay.
I think I need to go and possibly others.
So
It's
we have
always a nice thing on a Friday morning to talk to you all.
Yes,
Um,
indeed.
Yes.
So
Yeah, quite.
just a reminder, if you could sort of leave these documents alone for half an hour or so, I'll just rename them and put them all in type that I find easier, font that I find.
yes.
read.
Okay.
And then,
And,
and
and
then we,
we work on them for a week, and then we reconvene
next,
same time, same place.
yeah, we work on 6.1 to 6.3 particularly, and make suggestions on 6.4 and 6.5.
Okay.
Dennis, could you accept all the old changes for 6.5? Because there's currently 12 pages of crossed out things before you get to like the bits of text.
Oh, right.
I think it's just quite confusing.
By accepting all the changes, yeah, sure, okay.
Thank you.
Yes, I think,
Bye,
I mean, I think
everyone.
those that are working on them probably, if there's anything they don't want to accept or to leave in a comment or something, but otherwise to accept changes so that we can read it fairly easily.
Yeah.
And get rid of
Okay, have a nice
Okay.
weekend all. Bye bye.
Yeah. And you.
Okay. Thank you to all of you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.